Alright, students, this one's going to be a doozy. It's going to be, even though it's just one small lesson on elasticity, as you could go to your McGraw-Hill on page 51. Alright, you go at the very top, it should be the one that we just left off on, and that is what is supply. Now, we go towards the very bottom, which is where we left off after we covered the shifters of supply, all the change in supply and all the factors and all that stuff, right? We're going to move on to the elasticity of supply. Now, we've covered before the elasticity of demand, which we had three different ways to identify the elasticity of demand, right? And we had I taught you guys by looking at the curve and knowing that when the curve is slanted really tightly, right, with a very tight maybe slope, right, that would be an inelastic demand of the curve. And then if it was very steep, right, or not steep, but more horizontal, right, then would be an elastic demand. And then if it was perpendicular, right, then that would be unit elastic. So just like in the other two ways, of course, we're doing the total expenditures test and then asking the three questions for yes or no. And we're going to kind of go back to that in just a bit as well. But first, we're going to cover the elasticity of supply. Okay, so just like the elasticity of demand, right? Elasticity of supply is exactly the same stuff, right? It is a measure of the degree in which the quantity supplied responds to the change in price. Okay, so instead of the consumer, right, reacting to a change in price, this time it is the supplier reacting to a change in price. And so you see different cases of these things, right? So the three are exactly the same as the demand elasticity. We have elastic supply, inelastic supply, and unit elastic supply. The first one being elastic supply. What that means is that the due to a change in price, right, there tends to be the supplier does a large or quick change to quantity supply. All right, so it reacts a lot, just like how in an elastic demand, right? We change our demand really quickly in the change of price. For suppliers, though, a change in price would cause a change, a large change in quantity supplied, and inelastic supply. So just similar to inelastic demand, right? It means that in the case that the change in price, what would happen is that there would be a smaller change in quantity supplied. And then lastly, we have our unit elastic supply, which means it is proportional. All right, so that means as the price changes, then so does the supply proportionally. And of course, in real life situations, we don't usually see a unit elastic supply case in real life. It's very rare to see one of those things, but the only reason why we have a unit elastic supply is just to create a divider, right? It's just so we can understand that there's a difference between inelastic supply and elastic supply. So if we kind of look over here into this little diagram in the figure below, we have our, this is an example of elastic supply. And just like in demand, right, when this guy looks really steep, right, when it looks not steep, but I guess very plateaued, right, it looks more and more like an E, right? It makes an E shape to it, like the flat part or the middle part of the E, right? So if you see here, right, a change in price, right, you can see over here at price number one, and at the quantity number two, when it went up $1, the quantity supplied went over quite a few spaces, right? Went over quite a few spaces, and it reacted very, very much to that change in price. Even though it was only a $1 change, the quantity changed over quite a bit, right? So this right here would be an example of elastic supply. Now, if we go over to the next one on your book right here, you see inelastic supply. This time, for this product, a $1 change in price, rather than changing the supply, the quantity supplied over by a few units, this one only changed by one. So it was a smaller change in comparison to the other product, right? To the other product. Now, before, we really didn't have anything to compare it to, right? How can you just tell that an elastic supply is elastic when you have nothing else to compare it to? Until we saw this slide, now you're just like, oh, okay, I kind of see it. This one had a smaller change, right? You can see over here that it only changed 1 in quantity for $1 change, right? So this right here would be an inelastic supply. Now, you might think, well, Mr. Lopez, it went over $1 and it also changed over $1. Does that mean it's unit elastic? Not always the case. It's a little bit tricky to kind of explain these situations, which is why it kind of further going deeper into this topic. And so the change in quantity supplied here, you see it does a relatively smaller change or changing price made a relatively smaller change in supply in that case. When we go back to the elastic supply, you see that it has a much larger change in quantity. Now, lastly, we have right here our unit elastic supply, and if you can see here, for some reason, right, it's a change in $1, and it still went over a little bit more than the inelastic problem. So if we go back, right, you see inelastic, it went over 1 and it rised 1. So you see there, it technically, wouldn't you think that it would be it would be unit elastic, but not always the case, and we're going to go into that in just a bit. But you see right here, the quantity supplied is proportional to the change in price, and so it is pretty much the in-between point. All right, this is pretty much the in-between point, the unit elastic supply. So this way, it's a way that we divided the difference between this inelastic supply and this elastic supply. So you see over here, this is pretty much uninelastic. It means it's a proportional change. And so if we look at this table, it just explains further that inelastic supply, then it would mean that there is the elasticity of it. There it is more than proportional. That means it changes a lot more in reaction to the change in price. Unit elastic means it changes proportionally to the price, or it's the standard divider, right? Inelastic supply would mean that in a change in price, of course, again, it means that the supplier doesn't react as much. Okay. Now, where do we see these situations? Okay. So if you'll read through this portion of the textbook, right, in case this video doesn't really help you out too much, but you usually see an elastic or supply when it's something that like a supplier is able to quickly change their production, right? And then inelastic when they can't change as fast. So the book, what they use as an example, is a nuclear power plant. Now, in order for, let's say, in this example, right, there is a change in price in utilities, right, and so this nuclear power plant, which produces electricity, right. Let's say the electricity bill goes up, right. Everybody has to pay more per wattage on their electricity bill, and so this nuclear power plant, however, can't change their output that quickly. You would think it would be easy to create more energy and put it out there so you can make more money, but it doesn't happen that easily. It takes because it takes a lot more labor, it takes a lot more machinery. All of these things there's a lot more connecting pieces that also have to move slower, so they won't be able to make that change that quickly. Therefore, a nuclear power plant, right, the energy that it produces would be inelastic, because it can't change that quickly. However, right, it would be more elastic for products that you can just quickly change on the spot, and you can produce a lot more because maybe it takes a lot less pieces to produce. So the book uses toys, candies, and many other small things, right, that doesn't take that much skilled labor, right, because you can just easily make them on the spot. So candy, right, all you need is sugar and maybe a couple of hands to help you make that really quickly. It doesn't take large machinery. It doesn't take a lot of pieces that are very complicated. It is actually very simple to make. So generally, products that are simple to make and quick to make, those are the ones that tend to be elastic because you can produce a lot more, right? Very quickly in response to a change in price. Something that would be inelastic, a product that would be inelastic, could be something like an iPhone, right? You can't just magically produce thousands of screens and batteries and different more labor just to produce more of that stuff. Maybe we do have the capability sometimes in the technology, but it gets kind of difficult. And so just understand that when there are more moving pieces to creating a product, right, it would be inelastic, right? Because it's more difficult to change and produce more products or produce less products in response to a change in price. While something that is more simple to make, like candy or maybe I don't know, something like juice, it, it takes a lot less to kind of change the production. So you can make less or make more at the snap of a finger. So that would make it more elastic. And of course, unit elastic would just be the center divider for that. It's really hard to find a real life example. So we're going to go over here. This is the sheet that I'm going to provide you guys. This is sheet 2. We're going to go back to sheet 1. Sheet 2 is going to be more of a, these are the questions I'm going to be asking you. Now, we're going to see here that it's going to go back to chapter 4 when we talk about demand elasticity, and I have a couple of questions. And I know these tables look pretty complicated, but I'm going to break it down to make it look a little bit more simple. So we're going to go to sheet 1, though. And this right here is our example from before that we made, that you guys made the other day, or whatever example you might be doing, okay? But I'm going to provide you with the quantity, supply, price, and their supply curve. And of course, this actually should say calculate. I was going to say calculate the elasticity of this graph. And then you're going to continue to sheet 2. Okay? Perfect. Alright, so one way to identify how elastic a supply curve is, which is one of the most, it's the main way that you're going to have to learn, is not only by understanding, right, understanding the slope. When it looks more steep, it's inelastic. When it looks more plateaued, it's elastic, and if it's down the middle, then that means it's unit elastic, right? But not all the time are you really able to tell, right, by looking at the graph. You have to calculate it to find out whether a product is elastic or inelastic, right? And unfortunately, for the supply, there's not really questions that you can ask. So remember back on the demand elasticity, you can ask these 3 questions. Can the purchase be delayed? Are there adequate substitutes? And does the purchase take a large portion of your income? And usually you can just answer yes, yes, and no, and you can identify whether that's elastic or not. Unfortunately, for supply, right, for products that produce or supply, it's not that easy. Alright, what you have to do is this little math problem, which hopefully you guys all remembered from your math classes, which is just the change in price over change in quantity. And how we calculate that is the new minus old divided by the new minus old. Alright, as you can see over here. So this is what we're going to do, and I'm going to try to break this down as slowly as possible to make sure that it's at least as confusing as possible. If it makes it easier for you, you can write it down on a piece of pen and paper, but I'm showing you on an Excel file or a Google Sheet to make this a little bit more practical, because this is how economists do it in real life with their graphs and with an Excel sheet. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. Okay, we have our supply schedule here. And we have our graph. The graph is just there for your physical, or not physical, but a visual representation. We're really going to be borrowing these numbers here. And really, all you're going to do is borrow 2 points on here. So it could just be this 45 and 50 with this change in price going over here. So this is what you got to know. Change in price, right? So what this is, the equation to calculate elasticity is the change in price divided by change in quantity. If your answer is more than 1, then that means this product is elastic. If your answer is less than 1, your product is inelastic. And if your answer is equal to 1, then your product is unit elastic. And how we do that is the change in price equals the new price minus the old price, divided by the change in quantity, which is the new quantity minus the old quantity. So let me do it for you right here, and please follow along as best as you can on an Excel file or Google Sheet to help you understand this. So what we're going to do, all right, we're just going to pick 2 points. And it could be any of them on here, and you can do them with any of them here, and it should be the exact same thing. All you have to do is have an older price, and a newer price, and an older quantity, and newer quantity. So right here, I'm going to call this one change in I'm going to call this change in price, since that's the first one we want to calculate. And this little column right here, I'm going to call this change in quantity. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write down I'm going to put my answers in here, and then so that way you guys can see. I'm going to highlight these two things, so that way you can see where I'm going to put my answers. Okay, so change in price. So remember, change in price is a new price minus an old price. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the equal sign, because that will make this a function. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a new price and an old price. So let's call 45, or actually that's quantity supplied, right? Let's call, I'm going to go with 5. How about that? We're going to go with 5 on this thing. You can choose any number on here, right? I'm just going to call 5, right, on here. So 5 is somewhere around here, and then we're moving from this point to another point over. So I'm going to call 5 our old price, okay? But we don't want to use that just yet in that case, because we're going to have to be subtracting it. So our new price is going to be the next one over, which is 6. So 6 is our new price, as we see over here, and then minus our old price of $5, as we're moving from one price to another. So we're going as we're increasing in price, we're seeing the change, okay? So we're going with the lower price minus, or the newer price, which is the higher price, minus the lower price. All right, so we get to change the change in price equals $1. Okay, now we're gonna go to change in quantity. Now we're gonna have to use those exact two guys right here. Okay, these two guys right there. So what I'm gonna do here is we're gonna go to change in quantity. We're gonna press equals to make it a function. Remember, we used the $6 as our new price, so we got to use our new quantity, which is 70, right? Subtracted by our old quantity, which is 65. So all I'm doing is pressing equals, pressing on the 70, minus, and then pressing on the 65, and then we're going to hit enter. Great. So our change in price was $1, and our change in quantity was 5. So over here, this is going to be our P divided by Q. Alright, so right under here, okay, right on, oh my goodness, let's go. This is just labeling, and right in this box right here, okay, right in this box, this is what I'm going to do, okay? All I'm doing is I'm organizing this a little bit so that way you guys can see a little better, okay? So in this little box right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just divide these two together, okay? So we're going to hit equals, and so remember the numerator is change in price, so that's over here. Change in price, all right, divided by, so I'm putting the divide, so we did equals, change in price, divided by, click on the change in quantity, okay? We hit enter, okay? The answer might come out as a price. Let's just change that thing up. So we're gonna go over here, go to more formats, and we're just gonna make it number. Okay. So the answer was 0.2. Okay. So if the answer is 0.2, is it greater than 1, less than 1, or equal to 1? Obviously, this guy right here is less than 1. That would make this. So I'm gonna put type of elasticity. Okay, and I'm gonna leave these things on here for you guys, so that way it'll help you out. So type of elasticity, your answer, right, would be which one of the three? Elastic, inelastic, or uninelastic? It would be inelastic. Okay, why? Because this answer right here is less than 1. We calculated our change in price, our change in quantity, then we divided the two of them together, and we got that this product right here is inelastic. Even though you see right there, you can't always use the test where you're looking at the graph and it doesn't look steep, right? So you're just like, oh, you know what? That means this is elastic. You can't always do that thing, all right? That only works as a cheat code if you really have nowhere else to go. But really, the way this method right here, calculating this and finding out the change in price over the change in quantity, and whether it's more or less than 1, right? That is how you find out when something's inelastic or elastic. If this answer was greater than 1, that would make this an elastic product for supply. So this right here, if this kind of confuses you a bit, please look back as best you can, and I'll probably make a new video maybe tomorrow to kind of further explain this if students are struggling with this. Okay, so I want you guys to go through this as best as you can. I'm going to go ahead and delete these. Alright, that way this is the file that I'm going to be sending over to you guys, okay? So we're going to move over to sheet 2. So for this assignment, you're going to have to, I need to see that you're following along, so I want to see those answers in there, but I got to see that you put in the formulas. I am not going to see that you're just writing in and typing in the answers. You got to actually write in the formulas to receive full credit. Okay. Now we're gonna go over to sheet 2. We're going to take a step back to chapter 4, demand elasticity, just to kind of refreshen you guys about demand elasticity. Remember that for each of these products, right, you can ask yourself 3 questions, right? 3 questions, and then that will give you this answer over here, what type of elasticity this product has, okay? So let me make sure that this is all centered. I like to format that thing. Okay, perfect. So for each of these products, you got to ask yourself these 3 questions. Answer yes or no, and therefore yes or no will help you identify whether it's elastic or inelastic. Remember, I think it is when more questions equal yes, that means it is an elastic demand, and if it is no, that means it is an inelastic demand. Okay, let me double check by going back. Right, we can always go back on our book, and we can go all the way to our elasticity of demand. And remember, you can always do this. So we go over here. Let's go to the questions. It says over here, questions. Yes, so if it is more yeses, right, it would be elastic. If there's more no's, it would be inelastic. Perfect. That's how we utilize our book to always go back, or you can always go back on your notes. So we're going to answer this question. Now, for these guys right here, let's ask these questions as if with this current situation that we're going through right now with the coronavirus, right? So for toilet paper, right? So I'm just going to walk you through a few of these questions, and I'm going to show you how I want these answers to be, right? You're just going to answer yes or no on these 3 right here, and then your final answer will go in this column, okay? So for toilet paper, for example, can the purchase be delayed, okay? Right now, I mean, if there wasn't the case of coronavirus, you know, your toilet paper, if you ran out of toilet paper, are you gonna delay it? You probably want to have toilet paper immediately. I know maybe some of you guys are better off and say, you know what? No, for me, I can do without toilet paper for a bit, and that's totally fine. Maybe you find alternatives, which is the next question, right? Are there adequate substitutes for toilet paper? Can you use something else than toilet paper to wipe your butt? I don't think so. Well, maybe you can, but it depends on your answer. And I'd like to, and of course for these, it kind of depends. So I would like to know your answer to this. But are there adequate substitutes for toilet paper? But perhaps, right? You could use other types of wipes, or you could use a bidet, in which the French use, which the toilet actually squirts water at you, right? There are adequate substitutes. In terms of adequate, you got to remember that, because here in the United States, we really don't have an alternative other than toilet paper. I'm going to say that the answer is no, because right now in our current situation, we really don't have an adequate substitute other than toilet paper, unless you're super duper innovative, right? Does the purchase use a large portion of your income? Last time I checked, toilet paper is not that expensive, right? So the answer is no. Therefore, the answer to this, if there's 3 no's, right, it is a more inelastic product, okay? Now we're going to go over to here to Clorox wipes, right? Or how about let's use something else? Let's go to perhaps a cup of noodles, all right? Because that way you guys could go through all of these things. So cup of noodles, okay? Can the purchase be delayed for cup of noodles? Yes, it can. There's tons of other things that you can do other than eat cup of noodles or buy cup of noodles. Are there adequate substitutes for cup of noodles? In terms of food and whatnot, I think yeah, because you can buy pasta, you can buy other foods. Like, you don't have to buy cup of noodles, right? You can be buying something else other than cup of noodles, right? Does the purchase use a large portion of your income? No. Cup of noodles are absolutely cheap, right? So that means that this, because there are 2 yeses and 1 no, this is more of an elastic product. Even during this time of coronavirus, I would say so. Let's see. Let's go coronavirus vaccine. How about we'll use that as an example? Make sure you guys fill out the rest of these and whatnot, but I'm going to do these 3 as an example, okay? Coronavirus vaccine, okay? Can this should you delay, right, or should you delay on getting a vaccine for the coronavirus? No, you probably should not, right? Even if that thing, you know, like if there is no vaccine or whatnot, like you want to make sure you seek medical attention if you do test positive or anything like that. Okay, are there adequate substitutes to the coronavirus vaccine? There would not be. Okay, there is no other alternative to that. Does the purchase use a large portion of your income? It might. It might. Who knows? All right. But generally, they make these things pretty available and cheap, so we don't know yet. Okay. But does it use? Generally, hopefully, it does not. But even if the answer was yes or no, the answer still is 2 no's over 1 yes, right? So that would make this an inelastic product. Okay. So you are to fill out the rest of those things to identify whether it is an elastic or inelastic demand product. Okay. Now we're going to head over down to our second question. Okay, this is when we did the total expenditure. We're doing the total expenditure test to identify this. Now we haven't really had practice with this before, which is why I'm making sure I'm giving you guys the practice now. And just know that for the test, all right, for the online test, I want you guys to get used to this, because this is most likely how I'll be testing you through Google Classroom in case that we don't come back to school for quite a few weeks. Okay, so please get used to this and ask lots of questions when it comes to using Google Classroom or Google Sheets as well. Okay, so I provided you with this data here. Okay, so it says right here, use the total expenditures test to determine the elasticity for the following products. Okay. So what this means, remember, is that the expenditure is just how much money you are spending overall on this product. Okay. So look at this image. This image just kind of just helps you with understanding which direction we're going. We're going from point A over to point B. Okay. So we're just trying to see when as the prices decrease. All right, where is our expenditure going? And just know that if expenditures go up, right, if we spend more money, that means it's an elastic product. If it's the opposite, right, if it's vice versa, so let's say as the price decreases, right, if we're spending less money, that means it's inelastic. And then if it's somehow as the price decreases, right, if overall we're spending the same money as before, that means it is unit elastic. Okay, so over here we're gonna go ahead and let's just do this first problem as an example. Okay, so this problem right here at point A, so this right here is point A, and this column over here is point B. Okay, so at point A we have at $6 the quantity is 3. Okay, and at point B over here the price is $4, of course, because it should have dropped. It went from $6 to $4 over here, but the quantity increased. Okay, the quantity increased. In fact, of course, in every single one of these cases, the quantity should increase because that's the law of demand, right? So over here, the quantity went to 5. So it went from over here to 3 to 5 over here. So how are we going to calculate the expenditures? Let's follow along. Okay, this is going to take a little bit of Excel skills again. So over here in this column that says expenditure A, this is what you're going to do. You're going to hit the equal sign to create a function. Okay. So remember, the expenditures is just how much money you're paying for overall. So if you're buying 3 of this product at $6, how much money are you spending? You can do that in your head, right? You could just be like, well, sir, I believe that's $36, right? Or 18, not 36, $18, right? So how'd you get that? You multiply the two of them together. So over here, right, we're gonna press equals, right? And you're gonna go to you're gonna press on the 6 right over here. Okay, you're gonna press the little star, this little star button, right, for times. Okay, so for times on your keyboard, that's right above your 10 key, or it's gonna be Shift 8 on the top of your keyboard. Okay, we're gonna go times $3. I mean, not $3, but it's $6 times the quantity of 3. We hit enter. At point A, if we bought 3, right, times 6, that is $18. Now we're gonna go over here to expenditure B. Okay, because remember we went from point A to point B. So over here, we're gonna do now over here point B. So this at $4 this time, right? Where you're gonna multiply this thing times 5 because we bought 5 of them this time at $4 each. So now we spent $20. Okay, so at point A we were spending $18, and at point B we're now spending $20. So our expenditures went up. Okay, our expenditures went up. So if our expenditures went up when we went from point A to point B, right? That means that this is an elastic product. Okay, elastic. So let's do the next one for you. Okay. So again, we're gonna have to press equals, right, to find out this next product over here. It is still at $6, right? We're gonna multiply that by 3. So our expenditures at point A is still $18, right? Nothing has changed. The only thing that's changed though now is that at the price at $4, our quantity is 4.5. So let's see what happens there. So we're gonna do 4 times 4.5, and now our price, right? We're spending the exact same money, right? So at point A over here, we spent $18, and at point B, we're still spending $18. So if there is no price difference, what does that mean? It means that this product is unit elastic. Okay, it is unit elastic. So that's where you're gonna put your final answer. Now let's look over here for this third product. Now you probably figured out by now, if you're an Excel expert or Google Sheet expert, you should know that you don't have to retype in this this function every single time. What you could do is, if you're using the same function, you can click on this file right here, or this cell, and you can grab this little dot at the bottom and just drag down. All right, and if you look at the function, you can verify it. It is multiplying those two spots right there, which again is $6 times 3, which is $18. Now if we go down to this other one right here, it is now $16. So this time we went at $4. We're buying a quantity of 4 rather than 4.5 or 5. So since our expenditures went down, that would mean that this is now an inelastic product. Okay. Now for the rest of these, all right, I can let you figure out how to do that. But essentially, what you could do is you can highlight both these cells, right? And you can drag down on this little dot, go all the way down to the bottom. Now you have your price comparisons. You just need to identify which one is inelastic or elastic. Okay, simple as that. Okay, if you're having kind of trouble on this question, right, which I pretty much kind of explained to you in its entirety, make sure you go back to the video or email me with any questions. I know this might be a little bit jump of expertise in terms of what you've been learning in your financial math class, but essentially this is what economics is all about too. So I'm going to go ahead and let you guys figure those out, whether those rest of the products are inelastic or elastic. And of course, again, in order to receive full credit, you need to have those functions in there. All right, I want you to have those functions in there, or else if you're just going through the video and just typing them in, you're not getting full credit on these on this thing. Okay, so we've covered our 2 ways to identify the elasticity of demand on these things. Now we're going over to our last question, which is on chapter 5, which is what we just learned, which is supply elasticity. Okay, so if we went back over here, right, we remember that I gave you guys a change in price, change in quantity, P over Q, and elasticity, right, to type in your answers. Over here, I made it really nice and organized, right? And if you notice, all the data tables here are green in celebration of St. Patrick's Day, right? Now, so over here, this time we have our supply. Now remember, demand, the slope is coming downwards, and supply, the slope is going upwards. Okay. Now, in case you forget, in order to calculate the elasticity of supply, right, that is change in price divided by the change in quantity. If your answer is greater than 1, that means this product is elastic. If it is less than 1, then your product is inelastic. If it happens to be equal to 1, that means it's inelastic. And how we calculate that, of course, so we have over here, we have our point A and our point B. And over here we have our point A and point B over here. So everything referring to these 2 columns right here is point A. Everything referring over here to this column over here is point B. Now, over here, change in price, right? If you calculate the top one, change in price, that is your new price, which is point B, whichever one is in point B, minus your old price, which is whatever one is in point A. Same thing for change in quantity. Your change in quantity is your new quantity, which is your quantity for point B, minus your old quantity, which is your quantity in point A. So let's do a little run through to see how that works, okay? So we're going to go through this first product over here, okay? So change in price, okay? So how are we going to do that? Remember, that's going to be your old or your new price subtracted by your old price. So we're going to press the equals on this thing, on that cell right there. So we have our price of $8, which is our new price at point B, subtracted by the price at point A, which is $6. Perfect. That should be 2 buckaroos that you get on there. Now we're going to go over here to our change in quantity. Okay, our change in quantity this time for point B, it is 5. Okay, that is our new quantity because that is what we're moving from the supply curve. We're going from point A to point B, subtracted by 3. Okay, so if we get that, we should have a change in quantity which is $2, and our change in quantity is 2, and our change in price is $2. Now we're going to divide the two together in this cell over here, P over Q. So you see over here, we have our P, which is $2, divided by our change in Q. You should know that 2 divided by 2 equals 1, but I want to make sure that you know how to use the functions on Excel. So we're going to do change in P, which is $2, divided by change in Q, which is 2, and your answer is 1. Oh my goodness. So if your answer is 1, that means that your answer, according to this little this key right here, right? Change in price divided by quantity. If your answer is 1, that means this right here is unit elastic. Okay? Wow. Okay, great stuff. Now, you should remember, students, that you can re-type this in, right, for this next problem right here. So we have $6 at 3 and $8 at 6, right? So we're going to do our change in price, which is equals, right? And price at this, it was $8, just like last time, right? Subtracted by $6, which is still $2, right? It's the exact same numbers. This time our change in quantity is 6 instead of 5, subtracted by 3, and now we have a change in quantity of 3. Now, you can recalculate all these things, and you can do it this way so you can gain the memory, the muscle memory of having to do this, because you won't always be able to just drag these things down no matter what. But if it helps you, make sure that you go through this one by one, so that way you know how to calculate these things on Excel, right? So what I did right there, I just did $2 divided by 3 on this cell, which is 0.67. All right, if we look over here, your change in price over change in quantity, if your answer is less than 1, that makes this inelastic. All right, this is inelastic. Okay, now you could recalculate this to make sure that you gain more practice on learning how to do this, or you can highlight all 3 cells and you can drag down. Okay, and of course you can drag down to the rest of them as well, and it already gives you the answers ahead of time. Double check that it's doing it correctly by clicking on those cells, and you can see that they are, okay? They are definitely doing so. But right now we're just going to focus on this question, right? We just drag down. We have $2 for the change in price. Change in quantity is $1, and our price divided by our change in quantity is 2. Now this time our answer is greater than 1. That makes this product an elastic product, okay? I want you to make sure that you do the last 3 on there so you guys can learn how to figure this all out. This stuff right here, all 3 of these questions, right? It might take you quite a bit. It might take you really quickly. Maybe this video was very helpful. It might be very difficult for some of you guys, but make sure you look back over and over again on this video to help you out with that, okay? This right here, because it is a little bit more extensive from what we did the other day, as some of you guys do struggle with kind of creating that graph or demand, that supply curve, we're going to make sure that that I'm going to give you guys an extra day to do this. So rather than this thing being due Wednesday, this will be due Thursday, and hopefully if you guys have any issues, then you make sure you email me those things, those issues, so I can try to help you out. Alright, so this right here is due Thursday. I'm going to go ahead and delete these on here to make sure that all this stuff that I send over to you guys, it is completely blank. So this is exactly what you guys will be getting on your assignment. Alright, it will be posted up on Google Classroom immediately after making this video. Hopefully you guys are having a great St. Patrick's Day and you're staying safe from the coronavirus. Hope to see you guys soon again one day. If not, hopefully you guys get used to these online lessons. Alright, let's do this. Good luck. Please email me with any of your issues.